point of view, where does he or she come in? We need investment in shares of construction companies, so the investor has to decide in what kind of a company am I going to invest. Is this going to be a good company or not? Is this project that is going on, or be it a renovation or a new construction, is it a worthwhile project? Or do I get my money back? And an interesting one, which is as true for new construction as for renovation. Do I, from the very beginning of the planning process, integrate all knowledge? Integrate the knowledge of maintenance and materials and use and design? Or do I just make the process as cheap as possible so that the experts come one after the other? Do I introduce sustainability criteria in buying materials and in buying the expertise? Or is it worth my money to do that? Do I invest in an existing building? Is it going to be a good investment? And once I own a building, how much is it going to be worth for a bank if I want to go and get more money and use the building as collateral? Or if the government decides finally to give some money because of energy savings, do I have the numbers to show that it actually is saving energy? So that means that there are different risks. The shareholder takes a risk. Is it worthwhile investing in a more sustainable company, a company that has sustainability in its operations? As a bank, is this project actually going to have a bad? Are there going to be some scandals involved in this project? Is my bank and my insurance company also going to be stained because of the bad reputation of this project? Because it's not sustainable? Do I actually take the business risk to integrate all design skills from the very beginning? Do I actually think that it makes sense to buy sustainable materials, or is it a greater risk not to care about the sustainability of the building? If my construction, if my new building or if my renovation is sustainable, do I actually have better tenants? Can I actually get a higher rent for the building? Does my building actually keep its value better in long term, so that when I need more money, I can go to the bank and say, look, here I have a good, solid, sustainable building. Please give me more money to do another renovation. And I can go to the government or a World Bank or somewhere and say, now I can show you the numbers. This is what I did. This is how little my building consumes energy. Please give me the support that has been promised for energy efficiency, as an example. Or maybe the real estate tax in the city is lower because the building is more energy efficient. So this is just a sort of a haphazard collection of risks: stock market, tenant, equity, reputation, business, data risk, which I think these risks can be avoided or overcome if the solutions are sustainable. So in other words, sustainability could be seen as a risk management strategy. Tourism industry, another risk-prone area, as you know, here in the Mediterranean. Yes, there are a lot of real estate developers, I'm sure, who think that this would be great and this would bring a lot of returns, but you know what's happening in Dubai today? The cranes are not moving anymore. There are lots of vacant buildings. So already reality has shown very quickly that this is not a very sustainable, even not financially. And we can imagine that in terms of resource use, it's certainly not a sustainable solution. Or then we have these nice, cute developments where there's a little bit of sort of history left. Again, this sort of your nice piece of preservation maybe here surrounded by another kind of reality. Do you really think that the tourists will be coming to this place in long term? Is it going to be a 5-star location in 5 years? No, I think this is the place where people like to come. I was walking around in Lisbon yesterday. It was all tourists. The Lisbon people were inside at home or somewhere else. But the streets were filled with tourists, and it was nice to see. It's a mix. We come here because we can feel the depth of time in these places. Of course, the one end is the preservation of monuments, the great monuments, be they historical or just building architectural monuments. But what we also want to see, we want to see the traces of work. We want to see all kinds of environments. We want to see the real work, the real history preserved in our built environment. I would love to see the Ližnave crane also when I come here next time, maybe in 50 years, as a memory of the big wharf that used to be. But as I said, this is the sort of the dirty, the unpleasant challenge that we have, not just preserving the nice ones, the cute ones, the picturesque ones, but to preserve and to renovate and refurbish the ones that don't seem to be so appealing at first sight. But that's where, again, changing perspective. If we ask the public authorities, what could they do? What could be done? What could help us, support us in reaching our goals? First of all, we need targets. We need benchmarks, guidelines, skills, capacity building, education. We need incentives for refurbishment, all kinds of tax incentives, money incentives, guidelines, and leadership. Targets from the EU actually has been very good. In climate negotiations, the European Union has been, of course, the leader in many ways. And they set the targets for our governments. And now, of course, right now they are negotiating whether the European Union would actually voluntarily raise the target from 20% of reductions by 2020 to 30% by 2020. But, of course, these are not just abstract figures on some EU papers, but they are something that our governments, each of the EU country governments, have to make come true somehow. And that's why the building and real estate sector, that's where the sector comes in. Because it, as we saw in the Intergovernmental Panel Climate Change in the graph, that's where the biggest potential is, and that's where it's relatively cheapest to implement the reductions. So in fact, no government in the world can reach any climate targets unless it makes its construction and real estate sector much more sustainable than today. And then we have the traditional tools, the different kinds of labeling system, conservation, guidance, and different campaigns of the lighting and so on. And this just to show you how global this is, this collection is actually from India, but it could be from any other country. But in many cases, actually, the developing countries can teach us a lot of lessons. Yes, we need incentives to preserve and refurbish. And I realize that in Portugal, this is a really big issue. So you need to talk with your governments, how to, local and national, how to make a long-term strategy and what kind of incentives would work best. And the public sector has the huge task to be the leader. Because that's what we always say, that if the public sector doesn't show the example, how can you expect that the private sector would do it voluntarily on scale? And I took this picture because it's, of course, not only the buildings, but also the built environment in a bigger scale. And we heard in the morning about the urban revitalization, and this is one of my very favorite urban vitalization projects from Latin America, where this pedestrian and light traffic road was built from the city center to the suburbs. So it creates, at the same time, it's a public space, while it is also a way for the people to get to work and back every day. So this is one example of sustainable urban revitalization. You can solve urban problems without cars. And this is also from nearby here, how public space is a sign of life in a city. To conclude, sustainability in the built environment means protection of cultural diversity, as well as protection of biodiversity. Actually, the French government has been very forceful in stressing this point, that in fact they are the same thing, cultural diversity and biodiversity. Protection of the natural environment as well as of the built environment. But today, one of the big challenges is climate change mitigation, and that's where these operations have to merge and meet each other. Social equity always has to be there, otherwise we can't talk about sustainability. And long-term prosperity, the investors have to we have to tell them and teach them and learn how to think of long-term investments instead of the short-term investments in order to avoid risks. And learn to think. One way to think of sustainability would be to think of it as risk management. Thank you.